And we're live.
Okay, welcome back. So on to the draft capital budget. We'll start on page 3 of the capital budget. That's administration upgrades, nothing there. So that's an easy one. Page 4, town hall capital upgrades. Carrie, do you want to just briefly kind of walk us through that? Or Jim? Who prefers to do it?
I can start off. I probably need Jim's help. So for 2020, we had budgeted to upgrade the HVAC system with respect to the air chiller and humidity problems within the building. When council voted to transition to OPP in February, we decided to hold off on those upgrades until we find out what's going to happen with the remainder of town hall as far as who will occupy the other side of the building. So we, and partly due to COVID as well, we shelved that plan. We also got quotes on the generator, which we had originally put in the 2020 budget as 50,000. But the quotes that came in were actually more in line with 90,000. So we've transferred the town hall generator project over to 2021. And we've also included health and safety upgrades to the existing roof hatches that are required due to health and safety guidelines. We have included the cost to replace 14 windows in the town hall with windows that will open. The current ones that we have put in do not allow for fresh air ventilation throughout the building. And we've also budgeted to replace the 25-year-old elevator door, which we did have issues with this year, and we do have it fixed temporarily, but we've been advised that we need to replace that door.
Okay. So that poor generator project, I mean, you can see in your notes there, we nixed it in 2019, agreed to do it last year, didn't get it done because of COVID. So yeah, maybe this will finally be the year for it. But okay. And Denise?
I just wanted to note too, we did a more comprehensive review with the generator and the critical need for it. Even without the police, it is very unusual not to have a generator in your key service area. So right now we've been relying on the portable generator, and that really needs to be dedicated to operations for their needs, let alone the fact that CDRC or the fire doesn't have one. As we move towards, which is great, a reliance on electronic service provision. If we didn't have power, we couldn't run the building. We couldn't have service access. We may also need our sprinkler system to be highly protected in the event of a power failure. So there's a whole series of reasons why a generator is a fundamental need, and the fact that there may be a day where the Grace Tippling Hall serves as a potential shelter or sheltering support, and power would be essential. Usually you can't have public or staff in a facility where washrooms, well, while we would have flushability because of our tower and gravity feed, what we wouldn't have is light, so we'd still have to vacate. And there's a whole series of issues, especially with the sprinkler system if it didn't work. So I certainly appreciate that it's a cost that nobody wants to support if you don't have to, but I would say that this is a critical priority for us for our functionability. And it's like insurance. You hope you never have to use it, but you certainly need it if you require it.
I think you sold us on the merits of it last year. we just
I just wanted to resell you because the price tag went up.
Yeah. But like most things this year, right? Yeah. Okay.
I just have a question regarding the, if I may, Mayor Mills, on the HVAC. I know a number, due to COVID-19, a number of businesses, including a lot of the schools, are sort of rushing to do that to protect students and employees. And I know that this is being pushed off to at least around February 2020 or maybe afterwards. Is there any concern either from you, Denise, or Jim in the sense of this being pushed that far? Or do you feel that, I guess, with the replacement of the windows and the fresh air, that'd be enough?
Denise?
To the deputy mayor, through the mayor, we don't see it as one or the other, but we see that the quicker solution fix is the windows to ensure that we don't have literally the containment of no fresh air whatsoever unless we open the front door. The HVAC was primarily driven by the needs of police to address a lot of the humidity and the air quality issues, not in terms of fresh air, but just humidity on that side, because the system was undersized for the amount of use that we were having, particularly when an operation was 24/7, 365. So I'll let Jim speak to it more. It really has to be done. But what Carrie also mentioned was it's really important that we have a better understanding of the total end use of our building to determine what the HVAC system will look like, including if there's space modifications on that side of the building, how that will affect the HVAC configuration, and whether or not, to your question, will it be still originally budgeted 187? It may be less, but we need to validate that with an understanding of the building. And I don't think we're going to see any real significant change in the building footprint until 2022, 2023.
Yeah, before Jim chimes in, I just wanted to make sure that safety wasn't being compromised, even though we're waiting for the end use. You know what I mean? So if it had to be something that had to be done now just to make sure safety was maintained, then I would say go ahead. But if you're saying that we're okay, at least with the windows for now, then.
Yeah, I would really encourage council to support the windows, at least some, so that we can get some fresh air in the building. We do have some reports from other engineering companies. The county had sent out a brief on how important it is to have fresh air circulation as a response to the challenges that we face with our building, having literally one door at the front and a side door exit. That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Jim, did you want to add anything there before I jump over to Councillor Buffett?
Sure, through your worship. Just as Denise said, it wasn't to address air exchange or more air in the building. It was concerns of heat and humidity, especially with the police outfit and the flak jackets being part of the uniform. They can't take them off. So that's why we had to add that in, and to kind of boost the chilling capacity of what we already have. And a lot of it too is the increase in staff over the years too. So the last upgrade or that expansion of the building was from 1995 as well. So there's, with more staff over there, that was where the need came for extra chilling capacity.
Okay, Councillor Buffett. You're on mute, Linda. I don't know if you're.
Okay. I was just saying, I had a conversation with Carrie this afternoon regarding some of these items in the capital project. And I was just wondering, I know some of the discussion is that we should look at putting the generator in for this year, but looking at replacing the windows, the comment that I made to her was that if you replace the windows, you're going to have diesel and gas fumes coming in the windows. So I can't see how that's cleaning the air. Would it not make more sense to have some type of a air purification system added into the HVAC system, and possibly look at doing that this year and not the generator? And I know that's not going to be what Denise agrees with, but I'm just throwing that out.
Jim, did you look at that, like some sort of air exchange? Alternative?
Through your worship, I haven't quoted any increase to air exchange or anything like that. We put the windows in as kind of the easier solution to that, and cheaper solution than upgrading, major upgrade to the HVAC. But again, this is part of the reason that the increase in the generator happened too. Like originally was going to go to the east side of the building. And when you're within 3 meters of a structure that has the capability of opening windows like our neighbor to the east. That's why we had to move the generator to the rear. So the generator wouldn't be an issue at that point because it would have to be relocated to the south end of the building. So you may get some exhaust or smell from the main street, but that was our thinking, was at least that would help with some of the hot, humid days where at least you get some fresher air through the building or sun air movement.
Councilor Buffett, sorry.
Yeah, but again, just going further on this, considering that we're still dealing with COVID, I don't see how that's going to fix anything because you need to have pure air and clean air. So I just, I find it hard to accept that windows with diesel fumes and gas fumes coming in is going to be a better solution to purifying air so that people can breathe in the town hall that are working there.
So maybe I guess Mayor Mills, to Councilor Buffett's point, whether staff could maybe, if it's not too onerous, I mean, maybe they come back and let us know what the cost of adding air purifiers would be in contrast to the windows. I mean, certainly Jim and Denise have suggested it's a cheaper option, but it may help Councilor Buffett and everybody else just to see what that is. And depending on what the price is, it may be easier for council to say clearly the window options are more suitable than the air purifiers.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. I mean, my thought would be we leave the line item in there. Presumably an air exchange unit would be more than what's allocated for windows. Anyway, so if we at least leave that money in there and commit it for that, and Jim, maybe you could find out what that would cost. But
through your worship, I can try through our ventilation contractor and see what they have for a rough idea anyway.
Okay, but then at least we'll have 30,000 and change set aside. We're not going to be doing this work over the next few months anyways, I wouldn't think so. Carrie?
And also, I just wanted to point out that all of these projects are being funded by the Town Hall Reserve. So if a project doesn't happen or it gets switched out for another one, it's not affecting the tax base because it is coming from the reserve. So it just means that the money would stay in the reserve if we don't get to it.
Yes. So these have no effect on
the bottom line. No.
All right, no capital projects for EDC, police, obviously, or bylaw. So that takes us to page 8. So that's the road works. Jim, sorry, I know you just went off there.
I can.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry about
that. So some more road resurfacing to do next year. Pinpoint, I guess, locations as time goes on.
Yes, through your worship, we have that roads needs study that was updated this year, so we can just keep working through that list. I believe Carrie has a better idea of this. We've just included the number that we've worked with this year, but we don't have any kind of confirmation on whether that's funding is going to come through or not for that. So we'll have to kind of play that by ear.
Okay, and same goes, I guess, with the Connecting Link funding.
The Connecting Link funding, we do have that. That's already been dedicated to us at 90% of the total cost. So we have started some preliminary work on that. SBA is working on any kind of other design and some curb works that we need to do on Main Street there as well. And then we should be good to go for next spring. And that the agreement's being adjusted for that with MTO.
Excuse me, Carrie, did we never put anything in for the AMO gas tax?
Yes, we do. It pays for debt.
Okay.
So just further on the MTO Connecting Link grant. So the amount that I have shown in here is the amount that we were awarded in 2020. But because the work isn't being done until 2021, I've included it in next year's budget. We stopped budgeting for the actual Connecting Link funding because for 3 years in a row, we didn't get it. So I just stopped including it in the budget. And so now that we know that we have received this funding, I've placed it in there for 2021, but we will also be reapplying for the Owen Sound Street portion. So if we are successful in getting that grant, it would be on top of this, and we would have to come to council again for approval to include our 10% of the project. But for now, all we've incorporated in here is the grant that we did know that we got. And like Jim said, the OCIF funding formula based grant is, we're unsure if that's going to move forward or not. The last confirmation we had for those funds was 2020. So if those funds are not being carried forward by the province, then you would see those mixed repairs not be done for next year.
All right, on to page 9, infrastructure projects, and Councillor Renato, you see there, that's where the AMO gas tax comes in, and on the expenditure side, it's just long-term debt for the Sister Street project. Page 11. Oh, sorry, Carrie.
Sorry. And last year we did actually use some of the gas tax money. The amount that we receive in funding is not totally spent on debt, but we did use some of that money last year. When we were unsuccessful in getting the Connecting Link grant, we decided to use some of the gas tax money to add to our road resurfacing works that OCIF pays for. So
this year we'll actually have some AMO gas tax money for our own interior roads. Whatever's left over.
yes, until we decide what to do with it, yes. The AMO gas tax has also expanded what funding source or project sources that you can use it on. So depending on some of the borrowing needs that we're going to see ourselves facing, even with as it relates to water and wastewater, we may have other uses for some of that gas tax money that is accumulating, including paying for more debt.
Okay. On to page 11, the workshop capital project, and this was mentioned in the operating budget. So there's 200,000 that we're transferring from reserves. Jim, do you want to speak to that?
Through your worship, yeah, I believe that's the expansion at our existing shop. So some of that down the road is DC related. So the more streets that we have, the more equipment we need to clean them, more sidewalks, that sort of thing. So the amount going into the reserves earlier was basically to pay for design with SBA. So a very smaller amount, and then DCs would catch up some of the rest of that. So not all of it, but I believe Carrie, but a good portion of it anyway. So that would be a couple of extra bays on the existing shop as it is now. So.
Okay. Carrie?
Yes, so those future projects that that Jim is referring to, and they're shown out in the 2023 column for 500,000, where 345,000 of it is being funded by reserves, or sorry, by development charges. But for the current project for 2021, that is just the continuation of the 420 work yard cleanup that future report will be coming to council
Okay.
on.
And to pick up on earlier comments that the deputy mayor made with respect to potential cameras, I guess if that's to be included, this would be where that should happen or not? No?
No, that would go under operating.
Okay, so not to backtrack then. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, so actually, this is backtracking as well, is we did budget for cameras for the town hall on the operations side, because once the police leave, there won't be 24/7 occupancy of that building. So we have budgeted for security cameras for the town hall, and we did get quotes on that. So we do have prices that we could incorporate to include in the on the operations side for the Luxton Way Works Yard.
Okay. What are the hours there, Jim? Like that somebody's physically around or in and out?
Three worship, they do fluctuate. In the summer, it's 7 to 3:30. When we get into winter control, there's the two shifts, 11 to 7, and then 7:30 to 3:30. So depends on the course of the year, but through the evenings, definitely there's nobody there. So till at least 11 o'clock at night during the winter.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, did you want to deal with that or?
Yeah, so I've already sent language for the motion to Jennifer. So I don't know, do I need to address that now or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
That was my fault. I was thinking that we deal with that in capital, but it's operations. So
do you want me to sort of read out the language of the motion now?
sure.
Jennifer, you have it there. I know she made some alterations. Jennifer, maybe if you could just read it out, or because I don't have it here in front of me. I know that some change that was made.
Yep.
It was, in essence, it was that council direct staff to find out the cost of installing security cameras at the Luxton Way Public Works yard and to report back to council with the amount.
Carrie?
So on page 10 of the operating budget, which refers to town hall, line 7419, we have in here security monitoring and installation of hardwired cameras and door sensors, $15,000. And that's for town hall. So whether that would be a similar quote for the works yard, Jim, I'm not sure, but that's probably about what you would be looking at.
I guess it would all depend on the amount of cameras. Yeah, you're right. That to be installed. And I think Jim spoke about some wireless options that may be cheaper. I'm not sure if that's the same ones that are being considered for town hall. So it may be in that amount or it could be less potentially. Jim?
Three worship, what I had quoted out for town hall was a variety of cameras along with motion sensors for upstairs, just to make sure nobody was in the building, in the theater side, that sort of thing, after staff would leave. So you pick up people upstairs. So it's a little more involved than what you would need at Public Works. Probably 2 or 3 cameras there. So I think quotes that I got for the park were closer to 4,000 to 5,000 just for cameras, unless we get into motion sensors again, that sort of thing. So
I guess there's maybe 2 different approaches. One, we could pass a motion to include, say, $5,000 for cameras at the works yard, or just leave sort of a more general motion directing staff to get some prices, and then I guess we would have to draw from reserves later, Carrie, if we didn't specifically budget for it.
Yeah.
What would you prefer?
We can incorporate it into the operating budget, I'm sure. If it's only 5,000 that you're looking at.
But I don't want to box Jim into, just in case more is needed. I want to give him a little bit more flexibility. But I guess it depends on Mayor Mills and Kerry as to how soon maybe Jim's able to get back to us with that, so we could figure out the exact amount and where we could draw it from.
Yeah, I guess we still have some time. You know, I don't know, Jim, how quickly you could get numbers, if that could happen before the public meeting, or.
Through your worship, yeah, I should be able to, but I've got a pretty good idea with the number of cameras over at Greenwood, what we can do, and that 5,000 should cover it easily enough, so.
Okay, well, why don't we leave the motion as is? Sorry, Denise.
I'm going to just ask the treasurer if it makes any sense to look at potentially applying this. Should we have a 2020 surplus so that we can move forward with this sooner as opposed to waiting to 2021? Sorry, Carrie, I just put you on the spot, but it is a priority similar to other cameras, and it's probably an important feature to include.
Yeah. Why don't we leave it as a general motion, sort of for direction then, and ask Jim to get some costs, and then we can discuss before we formally adopt this year's budget. And yeah, if we can draw from surplus from 2020 and get it done sooner, great.
And just before you close out on that, if and sorry, Councillor Banana, it looks like me have a question, but if you could maybe find out the cost between what you're considering, I guess comparing to what they have at Greenwood, and what motion sensor cameras would cost as well for the Luxton Way.
And as part of the Parks and Recreation budget, I don't think I pointed it out, but I believe it's in the notes, that it does also include more security cameras in the parks as one of the requests from the police. So we actually do have that in there under the Parks and Recreation for security cameras, signage, and more lighting in the parks.
Okay. Alrighty, to move on, sorry, Councillor Renato.
One, you don't have a seconder for the motion.
That's what I was just going to say. To move on, I'll second it.
I was going to, but.
Okay, go ahead.
And then the second part I was going to say is on motion sensor cameras, with people going in and out at 11 o'clock till 11 o'clock at night, those cameras would be consistently recording people going in and out rather than recording necessarily what we're trying to record. So maybe just leave it up to staff to look at what's the best type of camera for security over there and where it needs to be placed. And then, like you said, bring back a report to council and we can take it out of wherever. So I've seconded the motion and hopefully we get it on the floor and we can go.
Okay, so the motion, to paraphrase, moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bernardo, is basically just asking staff to come back with some pricing for cameras at the Works Yard on Luxton Way, and then we can consider formally adopt the 2021 budget. All in favor? Carried. Okay. All right. Page 12. General equipment capital purchases. So we have the additional trackless, the Ford pickup. This year, Jim.
Sorry, let me just find which budget I'm on here again.
Page 12 on capital.
Here we are. Through your worship, the one is a replacement of our one piece of equipment that does our back laneways, along with the blade and the sander for it. So it's a smaller piece of equipment other than the large plow trucks, easier and more maneuverable in the back alleys or back laneways. And then the additional trackless is just with more sidewalks over at Highland Village and what's coming up at Fieldgate. It was partially included in our DCs just to as an improvement to keep up with service requests. So.
Next page, page 13. This includes the line item for potential bus shelters. So there's 25,000 that has been set aside there for 2 shelters. Denise, did you want to speak to that at all?
Through your worship, we had looked at a number of different products and what other municipalities have. So there was certainly a range of costs, anywhere between 6,000 up to in some places 35. We still haven't narrowed down what would be used. There's an assumption that wherever the shelter, if it is installed, it would not be in the locations that we've currently selected working with Grey County Transit, because those existing locations wouldn't accommodate an installation and potentially a pouring of some kind of foundation to support it and any installation of light. So we've asked Grey County to give us a little bit more information on ridership and analysis to make an informed decision of where to put it. I did note last time that certain municipalities had closed their shelters during COVID-19, but have since reopened it. It was mostly in the Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Stratford area that had been undertaken. But physical distancing in any shelter would certainly still be a challenge, knowing that people would wear masks. And we just don't want to have a project installed to find out that location isn't going to work and they move it. We know Grey right now is reanalyzing their ridership and their routing and their times at the moment. So we've put that in a placeholder in addition to the 8,000 for operations, because we would have to actually have our staff hand shovel and remove any snow for risk, because we can't get any equipment in there to blow anything out. So that's really where we're at. So.
Okay. And that's new funding from tax base. That's not from reserves. Yeah.
Yes, that's tax supported. Operating is tax supported as with these purchases.
Yeah. Okay. Deputy Mayor Anderson.
And thank you, Mayor Mills. Denise, I'm not sure if you've reached this point in your research for the shelters, but I'm wondering, maybe I'm asking your opinion at the same time, whether it'd be more feasible to consider options of the shelters that don't have I'm going to call them glass partitions, but the glass surroundings, I guess, for the simple fact of, I believe you spoke to the fact that there is a maintenance upkeep because they're breaking of these glasses. You know, and I've seen a number of them in Toronto and in Brampton. I'm pretty sure that it's pretty expensive to upkeep that and to replace those. And so I'm wondering whether it'd be better to pursue ones that don't have that, and whether that would be lower on the cost scale in looking at those options instead.
Through the mayor, certainly we can look at all options. We would still need to salt and sand them and have some operating costs to maintain them. We are aware of another municipality that I think 16 shelters had all of their glass broken from a vandalism perspective. So that's another unfortunate reality we might have to face, and our deductible is $15,000 per incident. So certainly we can look at that. The reason that we assumed that they would have to have some kind of partition is to protect the user from the wind and the elements as they stood in them, as opposed to just having a shelter over their head, which was more of a rain barrier than a wind and snow barrier. But certainly we'll look at a whole range of different options that may actually then reduce the foundation and the installation costs, and then therefore the location.
Yeah, just to me, it may seem like a better option considering the upkeep and the example that you provided with respect to what the cost would be in repairing those glasses. I think that the residents would be happy to have something covering their heads. Whether they had something enclosed or not is another story. But anyways, we'll leave that to another day. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, nothing on the storm sewer or cemetery side for this year for capital. So that brings us to Parks capital projects on page 16, which I'll point out is the last page. So we do have included there tennis courts, 200,000, splash pad, 200,000 in 2021, and additional 500,000 in 2022. And then as discussed sort of earlier in the evening, there was 20,000 that was to be set aside from the general reserve last year for each of the dog park and the Jack Downing Park rehabilitation. Carrie, Denise, Jim, does anybody want to talk about the tennis courts or the splash pad specifically?
Which one would you like to go first with? Tennis courts?
You pick, sure.
Okay, so we included $200,000 in the budget. That was based on a review of design based on 2 courts, which would be fenced, not lit, and that would have a dual purpose, tennis and pickleball. The site not yet known, and the reason that the construction might be around 125 to 130, but there will be site works in terms of grading and leveling. So that's what that was based on. And we haven't picked a location. We assumed that would be part of the master plan consultative process. However, a location could be chosen, and then that would just limit future consideration of park amenities in that particular. I mean, the location that we've discussed internally, to be fair, is KTH.
Okay. Councilor Bernardo? Oh, you're muted, Walter.
Yeah, on purpose. So I wouldn't talk so much. Are we putting in 2 tennis courts, right? And 2 pickleball courts, or 1 tennis court and 1 pickleball court?
Through the mayor, they're one and the same. So a tennis court, it's 2 tennis courts, both of which would also be used for pickleball. They're dual purpose.
So 1 would go in KTH and 1 would go.
Both would go at the same location. They would be side by side, fenced together, and have 2 courts side by side.
I'm sure we were looking for 2 courts. I thought we were looking for 1. I don't know.
If you want 1, the budget will go down. We assumed that you'd want 2 because the current pickleball players have wanted 2 locations in their temporary use this past season at Greenwood, given the number of people that are participating. It's quite common for 2 courts or even 4 courts in some communities, but the budget was based on 2.
And 200,000 is based on what type of court? Like a cement?
No, a proper tennis court, not a high-end Wimbledon-like court, but we can certainly give you the general specifications that we were provided. And these costs were based on the most recent construction costs that we could find.
So I mean, like for example, it would be one where you do a base and then just put asphalt on top and paint lines.
It wasn't based on asphalt, it was based on a more proper surfacing, and then we would have to budget for future resurfacing. Usually every 5+ years, you need to resurface, and sometimes that resurfacing can be around $15,000. But you also want to address playability and enjoyment and also risk, particularly if you're going to have users that are running events or tournaments on those facility courts. And I think that was the expectation of some. But certainly if you would prefer as council to direct us to only have 1 court, we'll amend the budget based on a new cost.
Okay, and then my final question, that's including fencing and whatnot around them, correct?
Through the mayor, yes, it includes fencing. As I noted, it does not include lights or any other amenities.
Okay.
Mayor Anderson?
Just very quickly, and to Councilor Bernardo's question about the 1 versus 2, certainly when I was thinking about the tennis courts, I was only thinking about 1 and not 2. There is a demand for it, but I don't think it's one where we have to be overly concerned about the people who want to play pickleball and tennis would be having fisticuffs as they were down by Greenwood Park. So I think we probably could get away with one for now. I think if later on we got a sense that there was, exceptional demand and there was that competition for the one space, then we could certainly look at that down the road. But I'd be content with just reducing the budget, and maybe if we're only just looking at one, then we could maybe allocate the rest of that money towards fencing and lighting with the one port versus the two.
Denise?
So we'll certainly go back, look at the cost of one with fencing. Lighting tends to be quite expensive for the installation, depending on what kind of lighting, but we'll certainly review that and come back to council with the revised.
Okay, thank you.
Do you need a formal resolution, Carrie? Change that? No, okay.
No, I don't think so. I do have a question though. With respect to the dog park. So were you anticipating that would go in the 2021 budget then?
Councillor Wagner, let you.
Hi. Yeah, I guess it was just sort of supposed to hang out there until we could either allocate some more money for it or get it done. But with COVID, I wasn't able to do any fundraising over the summer like I was hoping to. But I know we don't even really have a location set in place yet, but it was just supposed to kind of be like a reserve, I guess you could say, just kind of waiting there for it. But it was, so that we had definite funds allocated for that specific purpose. So I guess if we could put that in there for 2021 and move forward, hopefully COVID won't be sticking around for too long, and I can maybe do some fundraising over the summer, and we could see this done sooner rather than later. I don't know if it'll be within my term, but I guess that depends on the voters.
That was my recollection too. I think on the discussion last year, it was more or less to set aside some seed money, so that all of that Parks and Rec levy reserve didn't get eaten up with other things and leave us with nothing for dog park. So I think maybe if we just sort of make an internal note,
Okay.
20,000 from that total reserve is to be set aside for a dog park, and then as we work through the parks master plan this year and pick a location, and as you say, as we do some fundraising, then at least there's 20,000 there as a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll make a notation of it as a future project. And where that 20,000 is, just so that we don't forget again.
Thank you.
Denise?
Just the majority of the entire cost was for fencing based on a linear foot. There's not a lot of other amenities other than ensuring you have an entrance for big and little dogs and a way to thing. In some cases, it can be temporary, then you just lose the labor for the install. But just to note that we'd have to probably just make sure again, because a lot of material costs have gone up, whether fencing is also in that realm of construction area where fencing is tripled in cost or doubled in cost of late. So, but that was the majority of the cost, was the linear feet that we estimated to fence an area.
Splash pad.
Splash pad, okay. So the splash pad was based on a project that was comprised of $300,000 being the commitment that the fundraising team of the Rotary was going to bring. And an additional 400,000 would be the town's contribution. We had examined last year a number of projects of similar size, and while the project that the $300,000 would support was more based on taking the structure and installing it on a ready-made and prepared site. So there's a lot of work to be done on the site to bring it up to the state where it's ready to have an installation. There may also be abutting accessibility and path issues for entrance. We just had an update call. We're trying to do them monthly with the Rotary, myself and Jim, and Carol is going to join their meetings on a regular basis to assist with enhancing the communication and outreach. to confirm that their vision and their understanding, with a little bit of a slowdown with the pandemic, was a 2022 opening. So that's why we, in our budget, had outlined a 2-year contribution from the town. What we most recently talked about to include potentially in our $400,000 contribution, and this is based on the experiences of a number of municipalities and the challenges with splash pads during COVID-19, was whether or not fencing, whether permanent or temporary, should also be considered. The benefit of that is if you have to limit the utilization and the numbers and also staff that potentially, then you have a mechanism to do so. As well, you will prohibit the unwarranted or unwanted presence of wildlife and non-wildlife such as dogs from being on there. And we had also indicated that in 2022, we would have to then include the operating related costs for the splash pad based on water use, whether that's a recirc system, which we anticipated will need to be, or a direct source where the water goes into the system and it's like your hose just goes into the stormwater. So that's where we're at. And we also know that, similar to everything else, construction prices are going up again. So we'll have to just reaffirm those costs on the site prep work for us to get into all the systems that we need to connect into the site prep. It'll probably be a late spring 2022 opening, or hopefully midsummer at the latest, to take advantage of that season. That's the update.
And the last thing was the Jack Downing Park, similar to the dog park, just 20,000. I had spoken with staff today and just indicated that I would definitely like to move ahead with that in 2021. The hope was to do it in 2020 to coincide with the 20th anniversary of the dedication of the park. Obviously that was beyond our control, but I would like to do it for 2021. And then I also wondered, sort of with staff, just kind of as a brainstorming session this morning, if there's some way to tie in a memorial feature, for lack of a better term, related to the pandemic, and get some community support as well for the construction of a new pavilion, and incorporate benches or something to deal with the memorial side of that park rededication as well. Anything else on the Parks and Rec capital side? Any other projects that anybody'd like to add into the mix for next year? It's going to be a busy year, it looks like. Denise?
So, I mean, council will know that through the consultative process, you will probably be faced with many requests for capital infrastructure. I know in the past we've heard that people would like an indoor pool, some very significant investments. So certainly through that consultative process, we look forward to hearing what the community values and they prioritize, because you'll probably hear about those. Our hope is to bring the master plan update to you for the next budget for 2022. So hopefully by September of 2021, you'll have a summary of what the public has provided to us in terms of their input.
Okay.
So that 2% will be well used.
Yep. Well, like I said last year, though, I mean, there really hasn't been any significant investment to our parks and recreation for a number of years. So, you know, the two levies last year and this year, I think, you know, we really show our commitment to funding these kinds of projects. So that's good. So that brings us to the end of the capital budget. Does anybody want to go back and look at water and sewer that Carrie presented tonight? I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of room for interpretation there. I'm okay with the draft as Carrie presented it. Kind of looks as though everybody else is. Do you need anything else from us beyond the couple of motions that we passed tonight, Carrie, to go ahead and prepare a revised draft for the public budget presentation?
I feel I need a little bit more direction, because normally when we present to the public, it's a budget that council is supporting. So what we've done tonight, there's only two changes that affected the bottom line so far. That is adding $14,000 to the task force initiatives, as well as I have subtracted $10,000 from the cannabis funding. So we've actually increased the budget by 24,000. So that is going to put it over the 6% levy. Was council prepared to adopt a budget with a 6% levy increase? Or were you going to consider using the tax stabilization reserve?
I need direction on that.
Yeah,
Because what I bring forward for the public presentation is a budget that basically council is endorsing and backing. And that's our next meeting, is the public presentation.
If it's okay, Your Worship, I was going to make a recommendation that we use the tax stabilization and reduce as you have recommended. And I'm willing to bring forward a motion to adopt the budget as presented with the tax stabilization reserves being used to reduce it to the percentage as suggested by the treasurer.
as presented and amended this evening.
As is presented and amended this evening, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, what we had said as staff, sorry to interrupt, that you consider using the tax stabilization for between 1% and 2%
That's what
to bring it down from, so we need direction on what you would like to use, 1.5, 2%. So if it was 6, then really if you use 2, it's 4. So just so we understand, because then we have some wiggle room.
I was thinking of 4.
So apply a 2% tax stabilization levy against the 6% budget framework so that the increase is 4%.
Yeah, that to my mind would be more acceptable by the public than us going out there with the 6% increases. I know maybe this is the time to do the 6% increase because we're in the middle of our term, but it's still something pretty rough for a taxpayer to accept.
Okay, and just to clarify, while it's a 6% budget framework in terms of an operating budget with capital costs included, when you apply the tax rate, it was more about 3.1, 3.6 carry. It wasn't going to be 6%. So you've reduced that significantly, which is fine. And then later we'll still have to address with you whether you're going to want extensions based on some kind of protocol for COVID relief in any of the other service areas. And then also, as we've mentioned, there will be potential revenue streams here that will be even further reduced from what we've estimated, even reducing them at that point. So just as we package all of that, Carrie, does that provide you with enough direction?
It does. I just want to point out what 2% means. So to borrow or take 2% from the tax stabilization reserve, it currently sits at 275,000. So 2% would be 158,000 based on this draft operating budget. So that's going to lower it's going to leave you 117,000 in your tax stabilization reserve. So what it will do to the tax rate is it will bring the tax rate increase down to 1.13% approximately. So 1%, say, from what we had reported in this budget as a tax rate increase of 3.18.
That's what I said, at 1%, where it's COVID. There's a lot of people that are pensioners and whatnot. 1% is more acceptable to the general public than the 3.8%.
Two questions. The adjustment on the tennis courts from 2 courts to 1, will that affect the bottom line though, Carrie, because that's coming from reserves anyways? Okay. And then the second question is, if we eat into the tax stabilization reserve to the extent you just mentioned, can we then replenish that, for lack of a better term, with the 2020 surplus?
We can. If you look on page 8 of the operating budget, page 8 of 41, I'm currently projecting approximately a $248,000 surplus.
Yeah.
So I've suggested here that it go to the general capital reserve, but that amount can be split however council would like it to be split.
And your worship, we can split part of that to go towards the stabilization, and part of it can be utilized for other things as we need them.
Yeah. Okay. Denise, sorry, did I see your hand?
So, yeah, so when we're trying to minimize the borrowing as well. And we would be looking at a funding scenario, well, as we did in the past, depending on how much severance needs to be paid for with the transition to the OPP. So we had detailed in 2019 that almost every reserve was going to be used. We certainly, as Carrie's pointed out most recently, aren't going to take that approach. But certainly if we have the flexibility to fund from our own source revenue, that would be saving us the borrowing impact. So sometimes the surplus operating for the year end is a prime way to look at funding mechanisms. It just means whatever we don't have for own source revenue, we'll be increasing the borrowing for those impacts. And we've already identified that we have significant borrowing pressures because we didn't get the Well 3 money, and we have other borrowing impacts that have escalated significantly from the EA for the waste treatment plant. So again, it's great to have a surplus, but we certainly had identified that there were ways to offset that in terms of borrowing impacts, even though we could pay it back in the future once the return on the investment and we reached the point where the OPP was costing us less per year.
Okay, so that being the case, and I'd certainly agree with Councillor Donato that, you know, if ever there's a year to dip into that tax stabilization reserve, that this is probably a good year. My only sort of cautionary note would be next year might also be an equally good year, depending upon how long the effects of COVID stretch out. And I you know, I'm hesitant to leave us too short in terms of what's left in that reserve to be applied next year if next year happens to be an equally painful year for ratepayers. So I'm just wondering perhaps if a more prudent approach would, you know, be 1.5% instead of the 2% this year. Walter, what do you think about that? What is the net difference on that, Carrie, in terms of dollars?
So if you were going to take 1.5%, it's 118,500. So a difference of 40,000. So the other thing too that you have to be cautious about is because you're pulling that money in as revenue, the following year, the following budgeting year, when you're trying to, you know, strike your 2022 budget with not a significant increase in the levy again, you're right off the hop, you're short that money that you've pulled in. So you have to make it up in some other way. Now, one advantage to the town in 2022 will be, hopefully we will experience some commercial assessment from the Fieldgate subdivision or Fieldgate development. So that will significantly help our tax revenue. So that's the only reason that we suggested that this money could be used this year, is because we do know that there is an alternative funding source coming our way in 2022. All being well, that development finally gets up and going, and we have some taxable assessment from it. So if you were to use 1.5 of the stabilization reserve, that would make your tax rate increase be 1.64%.
Still under 2%, I can live with it.
You okay with that then, Walter?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If it's under 2%, I think it's under the cost of getting close to the cost of living or under the cost of living. It's still something that we can live with.
Okay. I'll second that motion then. Is everybody kind of clear what that means then? Are we good? Any additional thoughts or comments on it? I mean, keep in mind, we still have time to deal with this, but this is more or less what we're telling staff to go ahead and prepare as kind of the final presentation that'll go to the public meeting. And then, you know, based on any comments we receive from the public, you know, the budget may change again slightly before we formally adopt it. But this is more or less what we're saying we're comfortable with. Is everybody good? Okay. All right. Are you clear on the motion then, Carrie?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll call the question then. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. All right. Thank you, guys. I know it's sort of a daunting process to have to go through, but I don't know of any other way of doing it and you know, giving it the justice that it deserves. So, okay, so that finishes off the general budget discussion. So then we can move over to review and discussion regarding recommendations from the Anti-Black Racism and Discrimination Task Force. And Jennifer was kind enough to sort of trim through the presentation and consolidate just the actual recommendations in the agenda package. So I think what I'd like to do is just sort of go through those in terms of short, medium, and long-term recommendations. I know that staff has done sort of an initial look at this. Some things are already in play, but we can have a discussion generally about these and narrow down if anybody wants to talk about any of the recommendations specifically in more detail. So page 1, Jennifer's listed the top 5 priorities that were set out by the task force. Any thoughts or comments on those top 5? Staff, this includes you. I mean, if you guys have any questions about these, I think now's the time to kind of have that discussion.
Sorry, on the safe place, it mentions the Mount Lloyd Center. Have we talked with the county at all in regards to setting something up if the Grace Stifling Hall is not available for a safe place, or the CDRC or some other location where they can be considered a safe place other than town hall?
We haven't formally, so I think, you know, that may be part of the implementation of these things going forward is, you know, talking with other partners, because obviously we don't have jurisdiction over that facility.
Yeah.
You know, just as we don't technically with the library.
But I believe we do with we certainly have some say with the and influence at the CDRC. And so I think the idea, and this may make it easier to some degree, was to really pay attention to the ones that the town actually has influence or control to implement. There are ones that we're going to have to engage our community partners and hope that they could help facilitate potentially. For example, if there's something dealing with the Upper Grand District School Board, etc. But I think the idea was to consider the recommendations that council and staff would be able to implement, because we actually have control over those items. So whether it's the website, for example, or a safe space, if we decided with the CDRC or town hall, then that's something that we could move forward with.
Any other discussion on those top 5 before we move into the short term?
You know what, I think that I'll take the opportunity to, as we consider all the options, I think it's important. I discussed this with the mayor today, and I'm sure, I know that all of you are online. Councillor Wegner as well is very active online, so I'm sure she would have come across some of this. But I was sharing with the mayor today that there's been a number of individuals who have reached out via social media, particularly on LinkedIn, interestingly enough, who have asked for our recommendations to be shared with other municipalities, whether it's Peel or otherwise. individuals have reached out specifically saying, hey, listen, we saw what you guys have done. It was covered in the Toronto Star and all these other different spots. We like what you guys are doing, and we want to bring it forward to our municipalities. The chair of the task force was asked to bring these recommendations to the city of Brampton. They are looking at what we are doing and want to see what we've done and how they could go ahead and replicate it. And I was sharing with the mayor that there was one that really caught me by surprise this morning, where 2 individuals reached out and said that this information that we're discussing right now is percolating positively in the real estate forums online. And a couple of agents specifically said that they are now recommending to their clients to consider the town of Shelburne as places of where they would like to reside in the future, or near future, long-term, or otherwise. And I thought, wow, I mean, not in our wildest dreams did we think that it would have that impact. And so, as the mayor pointed out in our conversation, it's not just the moral or right thing to do. There are economic spin-offs that surround our decision making. But this is just to point out that a lot of people have seen the work that we've done and are looking forward to how we go about handling it after the recommendations are being made. So it's just a testament to all of you, staff, and of course the task force for doing what we did up to this point.
Great, thank you.
So if I can, going back to the top 5, in our budget considerations, we never included a position for inclusivity. And I'm wondering if staff can sort of help me out with that, because that's something that's in the top 5 for diversity.
Yeah, I think, rather than get into the weeds in terms of funding each individual recommendation tonight, I think probably the approach we should take, and I mean, I'm prepared to make a motion sort of once we get to that point that, that we support these recommendations, but then ask for staff to come back with costs and sort of a timed work plan on this stuff. And to try to budget specifically, or specific numbers for each individual recommendation at this point, I think is too difficult until staff's had an opportunity to actually do that work. And I think, and Deputy Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was kind of the thrust behind your motion of setting aside 20,000 this year, so that at least in 2021, we have some money there to work with. Because even though that position is listed as one of the top 5, I do believe later in the document that is contemplated as one of the longer term recommendations.
So I just wonder, to your point, Mayor Mills, and I agree with all of what you said. Would it be more efficient just to ask council as to whether in principle they agree with the recommendations, and then if so, if there's nothing that stands out that should be singled out or withdrawn, if there's that general consensus just based on the timelines, what's there, understanding that staff is going to come back and put a cost element to it and a time to it, would that be more efficient just to move forward with that approach rather than trying to have staff address every single item at this point?
Yeah, and I'm fine with that, and I just wanted to give sort of due consideration of these if somebody wanted to pull out something specifically, but generally speaking, then in terms of those top 5, is everybody sort of okay, in terms of getting behind those? Keeping in mind, we'll work out the details later. Yeah, okay. So the 3 to 6 month recommendations, there's 12 listed there on the next page. Same sort of question. I mean, is there anything that jumps out that anybody has any discomfort over, or is everybody kind of generally comfortable with these?
And I guess what I'll say is that I found just in the items, at least from my vantage point, I didn't feel that, with the exception, of course, of those that we would have to rely on community partners, that these asks were insurmountable or not achievable. Certainly, there may be adjustments potentially to timelines, but quite a few of them were, I'm not going to call them easy, but I didn't see them as being onerous, and so.
Yeah, and I think to that point, in speaking with staff this morning, I know that there's some, at least in this short-term list, that are kind of underway. Denise, I don't know if you want to chime in on any of those.
Sorry, yes, through the mayor. For example, the one that was originally included in our eSolutions website design was to have a language converter. It was somehow lost in the process and was an oversight. So we've already moved forward with having that reinstated. There are certainly some things that we'll have to provide council with input on in terms of having an appointed member of council and how that actually isn't supported through legislation, but certainly we can go through each and every one of those. Some of them are quicker fixers than others. Most of the stuff that's website related is not difficult to move forward and increasing and enhancing what we provide on our website, for example.
And just as a follow-up to Denise's comment about, because the mayor and I discussed this about having somebody in essence shadowing council, it would appear to me, just based on your comments, Denise, about it not being supported by legislation, that if we were to move forward with a D&I committee, then that oversight, because I believe at the end of the day, what the recommendation is looking for is some form of oversight. And I think a D&I committee would probably satisfy that rather than trying to pursue that option on its face.
Yes, certainly. Council can have advisory committees or stakeholder engagement or task force. What you can't have through the Municipal Act or through the elections protocol is anybody appointed. There's a fairly specific legislative requirement on how you are chosen through a democratic process called an election to serve on council. So yes, you can't appoint somebody.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Last recommendation on the long-term list. Okay, the midterm, then 6 to 12-month recommendations. There's 11 there. Is there anything that anybody wants to speak to independently in that list? Finally, on to the long term, the 12 to 24 month. There's 8 included there, including the one we just spoke about, which contemplated the appointment of an honorary member. I think there's other ways of achieving the spirit of that recommendation, which are more in line with what we're allowed to do statutorily. That list. And then the others are sort of more general recommendations for the community at large and for the school board. So, we can sort of pass that information along to our counterparts. But in terms of the ones that are specifically within our sphere of jurisdiction, if everybody's generally okay with those, then I'll make a motion as follows. Be it resolved, the council supports the recommendations provided by the Anti-Black Racism and Discrimination Task Force as presented to council on October the 5th, 2020, and that council and staff will utilize the recommendations to develop a costed work plan with timelines for consideration for adoption by council in January 2021. I have a seconder for that. Councilor Donato, thank you. On that motion?
Just a quick point on that as a point of discussion. If it in fact is passed, I would just ask that because a considerable amount of time has gone by since the recommendations were made, I believe on October 5th. And so if this goes forward, I would ask that this motion be placed on the town's website so that people could see that steps are being taken and that they could see that whether it's the staff is reporting back in January, if that's what was mentioned in the motion, that they're able to see that things are moving forward.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Thank you. All right, so can I get a motion for the confirming bylaw? Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? Carried. And a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? All right. Thank you all. 3 hours and 20 minutes, but we got through it, so.